Hello, sorry for the interruption in the previous video. In this video, we'll continue the other mechanism of action of hormones, and also we'll study the second messengers today. Okay, so the third way through which the hormone can act is through direct activation of transcription. So when I say transcription, it is happening at the level of nucleus, right? But how is the hormone directly going to affect or activate transcription is either by binding to the cytoplasmic receptor or by binding to its nuclear receptor. So I'll give you an example for an hormone that binds to its cytoplasmic receptor. Example is a steroid hormone. So here you can see that the steroid hormone enters into the cell cytoplasm. There it binds to the receptor protein, and there is a receptor hormone complex which is being formed, and that complex enters the nucleus. Now, this hormone receptor complex will bind to hormone response element which is present on the DNA. Now, what is this? It is a specific gene sequence on the DNA for that hormone. This brings about the transcription into mRNA. This mRNA enters the cytoplasm, being translated by ribosomes into a new protein. Now, this protein brings about all the effects or actions of your steroid hormone. Okay, so it is direct translational process that which is activated. Now, another example I can give you is a thyroid hormone. So, steroid hormone bound to the cytoplasmic receptor. Likewise, thyroid hormone will bind to its nuclear receptor. Now, you know it is T3 and T4, but T4 also is converted into T3 in the cytoplasm, and this T3 will bind to its receptor in the nucleus. You know that the retinoid is very much necessary for the complex of thyroid hormone to activate, right? So this will now bind to the specific gene sequence on the DNA, that is the thyroid hormone response element, which brings about the gene transcription. Therefore, the mRNA is formed, which enters into the cytoplasm, and that gets translated by ribosomes. New proteins are formed. Now, this protein will bring about all the effects of thyroid hormone on different systems. Okay, so that is the mechanism of action. So we studied three types of mechanisms of actions of hormones, that is G protein coupled, then activation of enzymes, then activation of or direct activation of transcription. Okay, so how are these hormones regulated? They are regulated by their end product, that is whatever is being formed, right? For example, let us say negative feedback mechanism. From the name negative feedback, what do you understand? It is something which is going to counteract the stimulus to shut it off, right? For example, let's give an example. For example, thyroid hormone. Okay, so when the thyroid hormones, now say hypothalamus secretes TRH, and then your anterior pituitary secretes TSH, which acts on your thyroid gland. Thyroid gland will secrete T3, T4. Right. Now, this T3, T4 levels in your blood itself will inhibit your hypothalamus and anterior pituitary gland from secreting furthermore T3 and T4. Okay. So that is a negative feedback mechanism. Another is positive feedback. So from positive feedback, what do you understand? It is something which is going to increase the levels, right? So the response is going to reinforce the stimulus, right? So for example, I can give you oxytocin. Oxytocin is released from your posterior pituitary gland. Now that when this is required, it is required during delivery of the baby. So, when oxytocin acts on the uterus, it is going to increase the number of receptors also. It is also going to act by increasing the uterine motility. Now, it further increases its own activity. It increases the number of receptors also. It increases the release of oxytocin further also till the delivery of the baby. So, that is positive feedback mechanism. So, this is how the hormones are regulated to their own responses. Okay, So, another part of this chapter that you need to know is the second messengers. Okay, so all the you know that till now you know that the hormones are going to bind to their own receptors, which can be on the surface of the cell or in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. But when we are talking about this hormones which bind to the surface of the cell, how are they going to act? They have to either act through activating some protein inside the cytoplasm, which can be a second messenger mediated. Okay, so here the first messenger is your hormone, the second messenger is that which is going to bring about the changes or actions required for that particular first messenger. Okay, so how are the second messengers going to act? Either by altering enzyme function, or can alter the trigger the exocytosis, or can cause alteration of transcription of various genes. Right. So first best example we can take is the cyclic AMP. Okay. So the first messenger here again always is a hormone which will bind to its own receptor. Let us consider a G protein coupled hormone. Okay, now hormone binds to its receptor. You know that there is G protein, which is alpha, beta, and gamma subunit, which gets activated. Now, alpha activated with GTP is going to bind to a membrane enzyme, which is that it is adenylate cyclase. This adenylate cyclase is going to convert the ATP into cyclic AMP. This cyclic AMP is now the second messenger which will activate protein kinases. So it is going to activate protein kinases. This protein kinase is going to bring about all the required activities which will promote the action of this particular hormone. Therefore, the actions of hormones are brought about. Okay, so which are the examples of hormones which act through cyclic AMP? It can be epinephrine, ACTH, FSH, LH, glucagon, parathyroid hormone, thyrotropin stimulating hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, and calcitonin. Okay, so one of the best examples we could quote for cyclic AMP is cholera, wherein I said here that the cyclic AMP is going to be formed and is going to activate all the protein kinases. So it is going to further activate few enzymes for ion channels and the cellular secretions. So in cholera, there is excessive diarrhea. That is, there are excessive loss of ions and secretions there. Okay, so whenever there is an abnormality in that adenylate cyclase or cyclic AMP, or the virus or the bacteria that which is introduced into you, which is going to affect this cyclic AMP, can bring about excessive diarrhea and vomiting. Okay, so another example can be McCune-Albright syndrome, which is a somatic mutation that activates a G protein alpha S subunit in the mosaic pattern. So when it is being activated one after the other like that alternatively, there will be variable hyperfunction of multiple endocrine glands, which can result in precocious puberty in girls, can also cause bone lesions, can cause pigmented skin lesions also. Okay, next another example for second messenger is a phospholipase C, right? So let us take an example of a peptide hormone here. Peptide hormone binds to its receptor. It is again a G protein linked receptor. Okay, now the inactive GDP and alpha subunit forms GTP and alpha subunit. This activates phospholipase C. The phospholipase C is going to convert the phosphatidylinositol into inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. This inositol triphosphate now enters into the cytoplasm, acts on the endoplasmic reticulum, activating the calcium channels there, releasing calcium. This calcium in turn will bring about the cell's response required for that particular peptide hormone. Another one which is released here is diacylglycerol. This again enters into the cytoplasm, which activates the protein kinase C, which will cause activation or the phosphorylation of protein, which this protein will now bring about the cell's response or actions for that particular peptide hormone. Okay, so giving examples for hormones which act through phospholipase C second messenger system. Examples: angiotensin 2, catecholamines, gonadotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone, oxytocin, thyrotropin releasing hormone, and vasopressin. Another example can be calmodulin kinase complex. That is, so this is your calmodulin. Now you see, once the calcium is basically the second messenger here. Okay, so once the calcium binds to the calmodulin, you see that the calmodulin undergoes a conformatory change. So it undergoes a change in such a way that there is binding of calcium. And look at this. Look at here how the calmodulin looks like, and here it looks like a it is being changed in such a way that when an inactive protein binds to it, it gets activated. Okay, so this calcium calmodulin complex is going to activate a protein kinase, which brings about the activities of the particular hormone. For example, ACTH. ACTH acts through calcium calmodulin kinase mechanism. Okay, so this is to summarize the activities through second messenger system. Why did I tell you about second messenger? It's because there are few hormones which act after binding to the receptor. They activate few second messengers which will bring about the required actions of that particular hormone. Okay, so which are the different second messenger pathways we studied? Calcium basically binding to calmodulin, bringing about the effects. Cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, inositol triphosphate. Actually, it is inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. Okay, they all brought about different effects which we saw through. So in the previous video and this video, we attained our objectives of classification of hormones. We studied what was a hormone, we studied how to classify based on their chemical main nature and also based on their mechanism of action. Then we studied mechanism of action in three different things, that is direct translation or activation of enzymes or G protein coupled activation. Then we studied second messengers. So this is all about the mechanism of action of hormones. Thank you.